Hey you all, Carpetbagger here, coming to you live once again from the South. Now I moved here to the South when I was 18 years old. Prior to that, I grew up mostly in northern Indiana. Now when I moved down here, it became very apparent things are very different. For instance, down here they say y'all instead of you all. They drink sweet tea instead of beer. And they say hello when they meet a stranger instead of avoiding eye contact at all costs. But one of the most prominent differences that they have down here is how the Civil War is viewed. In fact, down here it's not even called the Civil War. It's either called the War between the states, the War of Northern Aggression. Now growing up as a school child in northern Indiana, the Civil War was taught to me with the ambiguity of a Superman comic. Lincoln was Superman, and he set out with the brave and noble Union troops in order to put down the evil that's known as slavery. In fact, Lincoln is so revered where I'm from, you could place him just below Jesus Christ on the level of reverence. All the states in the Midwest just seek out to be somehow associated with Lincoln. There's monuments anywhere. Anywhere Lincoln sat down, did anything, there's some marker. My state, Indiana, calls itself Lincoln's boyhood home when he lived there as a small child. Kentucky calls itself the birthplace of Lincoln as he was allegedly born in Kentucky. Illinois calls itself the land of Lincoln, so that's where he lived as an adult. Down here, things are different once again. Some say that the Civil War, or the War of Northern Aggression, never officially ended down here. This is made apparent by the fact that just about anywhere you go, you can still see the Confederate flag flying. So I put some thought into this. You know, we all live in America. We can't have the North and the South locked in this eternal struggle with each other. So today, October the 3rd, 2014, me, the Carpetbagger, is going to put an end to the Civil War once and for all.
I hate the Yankee nation and everything they do. I hate the Declaration of Independence too. I hate the glorious Union.
Now what we're going to do here today is we're going to take a look at both sides of the coin here when it comes to the Civil War. We'll start with what I was taught as a child, and that is that Lincoln started the Civil War, carried out the Civil War to end the evil of slavery. This is false. Lincoln began the Civil War for one reason and one reason alone: to keep the Confederacy from breaking off and forming their own country. Lincoln would send down soldiers to shoot, kill, and defeat the Confederate soldiers just so that they could not leave the family of the United States. He did not feel they had the right to start their own country. So there's a lot of evidence here showing that Lincoln didn't give a crap about the slaves. Early speeches, he made clear statements that he felt that slaves were not equal, that black people were not equal to white people. He said that they were a subclass of human, which, by the way, Lincoln, that's very, very, very racist. And one interesting thing is, when he actually begun sending troops to the South to defeat the Confederacy, he would actually instruct the troops that when they came across runaway slaves, to capture them and return them to their owners down in the South. Now, if that makes any sense, he's sending soldiers to shoot, to kill, to defeat Confederate soldiers. But if their property, the slaves, somehow got away, they had to take that and give it back to them. We're not here to take your slaves. We're here to shoot you and kill you, but not to take your slaves. Now, in the legacy of Lincoln, one thing that's usually brought up when it comes to his freeing of the slaves is the Emancipation Proclamation. Now, one thing people don't realize is the Emancipation Proclamation, it only applied to the states that the Union was at war with, the Confederacy, meaning that those slaves were declared free. However, any slave that existed in slave states that were still allied with the Union didn't apply to them. Border states like Kentucky, which were slave states but still part of the Union, they were allowed to keep their slaves. And the slaves in those states must have really felt like they were getting shafted. And, some would say that you could even make an argument Lincoln in no way freed the slaves. By the time the Emancipation Proclamation was made, saying that the Confederate slaves were free, there was really not much that could be done to keep slaves where they're at. The South was devastated, civilian buildings destroyed, all their men were off fighting. There was no way for them to keep the slaves at the plantations and continue working. These slaves were free to pretty much up and leave if they wanted to, or stick around if they wanted to for some reason. You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. So in some ways, this great white Lincoln jumps in, takes this credit for the slaves that pretty much freed themselves. Now, showing up in the South, my northern education, believing that the brave and noble Abraham Lincoln had set out and single-handedly freed the slaves, I was absolutely shocked when I was constantly reminded by Southerners that the Civil War had nothing to do with slavery. It was all about an ideal known as states' rights. Sorry, South. I love you. I really, really love you. But I'm not going to let you get away with this one. Yes, you could make an argument that the South was fighting for their states' rights. But the states' rights was the right to keep black people as slaves. Sorry, South. Again, I like you, but you did wrong. Now, earlier, we said that Lincoln did not start the war to end slavery. So, the South broke off in order to preserve slavery. Kind of confusing, but you see, the tide was turning at that point. There was public figures denouncing slavery, mainly in the North. There was uprisings. John Brown chopped a bunch of slave owners apart with swords. It was turbulent times. The South preemptively broke off from the Union. They could feel the tide turning. They didn't want people up north to be able to dictate what they could do down here. If that seems strange to you, just think about how we think today. Constantly we hear people saying Obama's going to take our guns away. Back when Bush was president, he's going to take our abortions away. That's a very American ideal, is getting angry and acting prematurely. So, for those of you, and there may be one or two of you out there that still believe that the Civil War had nothing to do with slavery, let's see what the Vice President of the Confederacy, Alexander Stephens, had to say on the subject. Our new government is founded upon exactly the opposite ideas. Its foundations are laid, its cornerstone rests upon the great truth that the Negro is not equal to the white man, that slavery, subordination to the superior race, is his natural and normal condition. Wow, that is incredibly racist. And keep in mind, that is the Vice President of the Confederacy, not just some random racist Confederate guy. It's pretty clear that the South seceded from the Union because of slavery. But that leads us to another question. Does that mean that every Confederate soldier and general was a giant racist bastard. No, absolutely not. In fact, the vast majority of soldiers who fought and died under the Confederate flag never owned a slave. In fact, there was actually a law that if you had a certain number of slaves, I believe, actually I'm not sure, but there was a cap. If you owned a certain number of slaves, you got an exemption. You did not have to fight in the war, meaning that if you had enough slaves, you did not have to fight in a war to preserve the right to hold slaves. We'll leave that for the people that don't have slaves to fight. In fact, even some of the higher ups in the Confederacy were not so happy about slavery. General Robert E. Lee, one of the most revered and high-held iconic members of the Confederacy, actually wrote that he felt the institution of slavery was evil. So, you have a nation of people, majority don't own slaves, only the rich elite own slaves, own a lot of slaves. But why were they fighting? Why would you fight for something that does not benefit you or yourself? Answer simple. Union soldiers coming down to preserve the Union. Showing up with guns, saying, hey, you know, we're in charge here. I think it's pretty safe to say most people would find that to be a cause that they could get behind. Say if a bunch of Canadians came down here with guns and cannons and bayonets and said, hey, we're going to tell you what to do. We're going to come to your house and tell you how to live. It doesn't matter. Maybe what they're saying makes a lot of sense. The fact that they're sticking a gun in your face makes you not want to listen, and it makes you want to fight back. And that brings us to one final question concerning this little feller right here, the Confederate flag. Now, is this flag offensive? I don't have the answer to that. Personally, I like to view it this way. And it's something that I've grown to understand over, the past time that I've spent here in the South. That flag means different things to different people. To some, that simply represents the South. It's the South's flag. It represents pride in where they're from, the culture, not necessarily involving slavery in any way. Do I understand why some people may find the flag offensive? I can see that. This was used as a flag that fought to keep slavery intact. But if you think about it, the United States flag, some pretty bad stuff happened under that. Confederate flag was around for 4 years in which slavery existed. The United States flag, much longer time, over 100 years of slavery. That's under that flag is when all the slaves were brought into the country through the international slave trade. And let's not forget how the Indians, the Native Americans, were treated under the United States flag. Is that something that we think about when we pledge allegiance? I don't think so. We like to think about the positives, the good things, the American spirit, the American dream, the good things, the positive things with our country. And maybe there's positive things with the Confederacy and the Confederate flag, positive things about the South, where people are from. And that's not to say there aren't some people who use the flag to antagonize people, to spread hate. The Ku Klux Klan has used this flag as one of their own emblems. So clearly they're using it as an instrument of hate, because anything they do is pretty much an implement of hate. So I'll leave that one open. But I feel very good about what we've talked about here today. I think we've once and for all cleared up some of the lingering concerns connected with the Civil War. And I think today we ended the Civil War. So if you'd like to thank me, just leave a comment down there. I appreciate talking to y'all. Thank you and good night.
Is dripping with our blood. I hate this striped banner. I fit it all.